Nowadays, gaming hacks are stuff you download and install and get banned for. The methods we used to use to hack games were far more interesting, though. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 10 old school gaming hacks that are extinct. Starting off at number 10, it is cartridge tilting. Now, if you remember really old school games, you used to be able to do things like adjust the way the cartridge was inside the console in order to make the game work when it might not. You could actually do a lot more than that by booting up the game and getting it going and then strategically tilting the cartridge as it sits inside of the console itself. You could cause some pretty bizarre glitches. For instance, way back on the Nintendo 64, you could force The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time to flash a screen saying, "I love you," which is very weird. But you could do fun stuff like with Super Mario 64, getting his limbs to just sort of disappear. Oops, Mario's just a body with no limbs. The way this happened is you would cut off small amounts of data, and it would essentially create glitches in the program. I remember my parents used to think that I had totally broken the console. Nope, just making glitches. Moving on to number 9, stupid peripherals, maybe useful peripherals, I don't know, for consoles and handhelds like the Game Boy Light or the NES Advantage. Like, the original Game Boy didn't have a backlight, so having an external light was actually really, really good. It was a hack that allowed you to play the game at night, for one, but was also helpful in low light situations that had nothing to do with the sun going down. Now, less useful was the Nintendo Speedboard, which was a piece of plastic you stuck an NES controller in so that you could use it more like a traditional keyboard with your fingertips. Like, yeah, I don't know anybody in the entire world who would want to do that. I don't know what purpose that quote-unquote hack serves, but it was there. But like, we're kind of seeing a little bit of that with the Nintendo Switch. There's some pretty wild third-party controllers and attachments for it, but there is nothing like the Activator or the U-Force or the Booster Boy. None of that nonsense. Thankfully, none of that nonsense. Because really, it's not. That stuff didn't do what it claimed to do. At number 8, now, a large reason why this is no longer really an applicable hack is because Flash games really aren't a thing anymore. But hey, did you know that you could use Tab to highlight clickable objects in a Flash game? Like, let's say you're playing a Flash adventure game, and you're like, I don't know what thing I'm supposed to click. Or let's say you're playing a horror game, or an escape the room game, and you're just kind of like, well, I'm stuck. You just press Tab, and oop, everything that's clickable is highlighted. And in Flash games like that, clickable is basically the thing you need. Now, like I said, there really aren't Flash games anymore. The Flash format isn't even supported anymore, so a lot of people don't bother with it. So being that the whole format is extinct, the tab to highlight clickable objects in Flash games is obviously quite extinct. And number 7 is trying to get enough quote-unquote conventional memory in DOS to run games. Now, alright, so this requires a little explanation. Playing games on DOS was a pain in the ass. Now, in order for DOS to run properly, you would have to boot up drivers and things, and you'd basically have to have programs just running. This was a time long before things were as automated as they are now. It's long and complicated, not something we can talk about in a single minute. And in order to free up quote-unquote conventional memory, you would have to close these programs. Now, sometimes those programs needed to be open, and you couldn't do anything if you shut them down. So sometimes you would end up closing these programs attempting to free up some very limited memory, and you'd just be stuck with a non-working computer rather than a thing that can play a game for you. And man, sometimes you just really wanted to play Wheel of Fortune. At number 6, using the Xband to actually play multiplayer games on the SNES and Sega Genesis all the way back in 1994. Now, let me go ahead and explain what the Xband was really quick. It was more or less a competitive online console gaming network. It was a big, very goofy lock-on cartridge that would connect to your phone line. And it actually did a really good job. Also, it was one of the few modems that could handle call waiting and somebody picking up the phone. Like, it wasn't as widespread as online gaming is today. At the height of its popularity, it had 15,000 subscribers, which is not really what I would call comparable to the number of people playing games at the time, which was tens of millions. But as far as tech goes, it actually was pretty revolutionary because consoles did not do that. The service ended in 1997, and it actually sucked because that was kind of when I wanted to use it. I never got to get in on that Xband action, guys. At number 5, and this isn't even going to sound like a hack, it's so pedestrian. However, it used to be that you could buy gaming magazines, player guides, and even cheat books for walkthroughs and cheat codes. That's right, you could buy print books, which would tell you how to cheat and or beat a game. You would thumb through the different pages, printed on paper, for information that applied specifically to the game you wanted to beat and or cheat. Now, it might sound like I'm being facetious, but genuinely, like, this is really basically not a thing anymore. At the same time, I actually have quite a bit of respect for this medium because it did kind of democratize information that would otherwise really not be easy to come across. Of course, that has been followed up by, these things existing on the internet, and then for a lot of cases, cheat codes being earned in game now. Which is kind of a weird if you can't beat them, join them attitude that takes the fun out of it, in my opinion. Not all the fun, but some of it. At number 4 is pinball machine tilting. Hey, did you know that the physics in pinball are very good? That's because they use the real physics, the actual physics of the world. But that means it's susceptible toward hacking by changing the angle of the machine. This is, of course, why pinball machines have a tilt sensor in them, so they could detect if you were doing that or not. I mean, if there was no tilt sensor, everybody would be tilting the pinball machine to get the score that they wanted. Is it even actually against the rules if there's no mechanism to enforce the rules? I don't know. So anyway, when you did the pinball machine tilting, you would really kind of be nudging it or, knocking it with your hip. I pulled that move more than a few times. It was actually pretty funny. You would often see people playing pinball, and it kind of looked like they were beating up the machine or getting intimate with it. I don't know. One of the two. I guess it depends on what you're into. At number 3 is auto fire controllers like the NES Turbo or the PlayStation Piranha Pad, which basically gave you an option to automatically, quickly press a button. Obviously, this makes getting through the button tapping sections of old games super easy. It's like cake. It's nothing. A lot of the times, features like this are built into the game now. Not all the time, but enough to the point where buying one of these controllers, you don't see it as much. It's not like they're gone entirely, but they're definitely not a prominent feature in the gaming community anymore. But they had gotten so common that in the original Metal Gear Solid, Revolver Ocelot was torturing Snake and you had to, do the button mashing to get out of the torture or survive the torture, rather. And he would actually say to you, don't even think about using auto fire or I'll know. And I was always like, mind your own business, Revolver Ocelot. You can't tell me how to enjoy games. Like the equivalent of that nowadays is somebody telling you can't buy shotguns in Valorant. Get away, I'm playing the game the way I like it. Man, I'm so sorry, game police. At number 2, you could trick an arcade game's coin mechanism to get a free game. And this was different for a lot of different machines, and in some cases could potentially damage the machine. But a fair amount of much older arcade machines had a very simple coin return mechanism that you could easily have access to given they didn't have the door on the coin return. And I don't know if this is breaking code in any way. It is definitely revealing that I'm old enough to have been in an arcade in the 1980s. But you could take a coin, preferably a coin that costs you less to get a hold of, like a penny or a nickel, and basically shoot it up the coin return and get a credit. You kind of had to flick the coins. It's kind of hard to describe, but once you got good at it, it was pretty accurate. It was probably stealing in some way too, though. I never got caught doing it, so I don't really know what the consequence was, but I'm sure it could get you kicked out of an arcade. And finally, at number 1, Game Sharks and Game Genies. Those things just don't exist anymore because there's no real reason to have them anymore. They existed by intercepting data that came from the cartridge and modifying it as it went into the Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo or whatever console. And generally, games just don't use cartridges anymore. I'm sure you could probably do something on the Nintendo Switch, but if I'm totally honest, I don't know why you would. It seems like a lot of extra trouble. And I'm pretty sure the Nintendo licensing thing could probably figure out you're doing it and stop you much quicker and easier than ever before. So yeah, what kind of stuff did you used to do to cheat or hack video games? Leave us a comment, let us know. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable all notifications. And as always, thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.